The Eight Immortals Travel East, Chapter 10.
Usually when we talk about the physical world, there is this baseline expectation of, well, solid rules.
Yeah.
Like architecture, for instance.
Right, exactly. You expect things to behave in a certain way.
Yeah, like you walk up to a brick wall, you press your hand against it, and it stops you. It is comforting.
Oh, totally. We really like things to be predictable. We want them to follow the laws of physics.
Right. Gravity pulls down objects, take up a defined amount of space, and time moves strictly forward.
And honestly, that predictability is the foundation of how we navigate reality. I mean, without it, the world would be terrifying.
Oh, absolutely.
We rely on the physical universe to behave consistently so we can afford to think about other things, like our jobs or relationships or just what we're going to have for dinner.
But then you step into the world of ancient mythological texts, and suddenly that brick wall is, well, honestly, it's just a suggestion.
Yeah, just a mere suggestion.
We are looking at a landscape of reality today that is completely spectacularly broken.
It really is.
It is the absolute definition of having the rug pulled out from under your entire cognitive framework. Chapter 10 of the classic Chinese text Journey to the East.
Which is just a wild text.
It is.
Yeah.
Because what looks like an ancient action movie on the surface is actually this really complex psychological blueprint for destroying your own ego.
Yeah, it demands that you leave your modern rationalist baggage at the door. You really cannot read this material through the lens of a 21st century pragmatist and expect to grasp what is actually happening.
Completely. I mean, we are following the story of an immortal named Crutch and his incredibly severe attempts to recruit and test mortal disciples.
Severe is putting it lightly.
Right. It's this profound exploration of human psychology. It's about the illusion of reality, time dilation, and the absolute, sometimes grotesque psychological barriers that we have to break through if we ever want to reach true understanding.
What's fascinating here is that the text doesn't just hand you enlightenment on a silver platter,
No, definitely not.
It shows you the cost. It shows you exactly how much of your own ego and your own perceived reality you have to completely dismantle.
But Lyles isn't just wandering the earth, testing mortals for the fun of it.
Right, he has a very specific reason.
Yeah. When I was looking through the background material on this, I found the inciting incident completely hilarious. He is essentially dealing with a celestial HR nightmare.
A literal HR nightmare in heaven.
Yes. He begins this chapter being punished by his superior Lao Jun. And the reason for his punishment is wonderfully bureaucratic. He accidentally let a green ox escape.
It sounds so absurd to us, right? But it perfectly illustrates the Taoist conception of heaven.
How so?
Well, it is not some nebulous realm of clouds and harp music. The celestial realm is a massive, intricate bureaucracy.
Like with actual paperwork and stuff.
Exactly. It has departments, hierarchies, performance reviews, and strict protocols. And Lao Jun isn't just some middle manager. In this context, Lao Jun is the deified form of Laozi, the legendary founder of Taoism.
Wow.
Yeah, he's acting as an extremely high-ranking official in the celestial court.
And this green ox isn't just like a stray farm animal, right? It's Lao Jun's personal cosmic mount.
Precisely. So letting it wander off because you left a gate open or something is a huge lapse in professional duty.
You don't lose the boss's car, basically.
Exactly. In the celestial hierarchy, incompetence has swift consequences. So Lao Jun reprimands Crutch lastly, demotes him, and tells him that to earn back his status, he has to go down to the mortal realm.
Down to earth.
Right. He has to perform good deeds, but most importantly, he needs to find and train a worthy mortal student. He needs to successfully pass on the Tao.
So he's on a redemption arc.
Right.
He's basically doing community service on Earth to get his cosmic badge back.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
And because his own reputation is on the line here, he is highly motivated. He isn't looking for a B- student. He needs someone exceptional.
Right. He needs the best of the best.
So let's talk about how he tries to find this person. He doesn't descend from the clouds in shining robes or anything. He disguises himself as an old man running a medicine stall in the Runan market.
Which is a very deliberate choice of venue.
Why the market specifically?
Because he's blending in with the most mundane, crowded, chaotic environment possible. A market is like the epicenter of mortal attachment. People are haggling over copper coins, worrying about fresh produce, completely consumed by the trivialities of daily survival.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But his stall is entirely unnatural. I mean, he cures every single disease instantly.
Right. Just boom, cured.
Yeah, you drink his medicine, and the text says it is immediately effective. And to advertise, he hangs a gourd, just a simple hollowed-out gourd or a hue at the front of his stall.
And that gourd is a really vital detail.
Yeah, it's not just a sign.
Right. In ancient Chinese culture, the gourd is a common container for medicine or wine, so it wouldn't look completely out of place to a casual observer. But philosophically, the gourd is a recurring motif in Taoist literature representing the universe itself.
Like a microcosm.
Exactly. It represents a self-contained cosmos.
And he takes that quite literally, because after the crowds disperse and the stall shuts down, this old man shrinks himself down and just jumps into the gourd hanging at his stall.
He just hops right in.
Yeah, he vanishes into a dried vegetable husk. And the people in the market are so blinded by the mundane reality they expect to see that they don't even notice the impossible happening right in front of them.
They aren't looking for the impossible, so their brains simply edit it out.
Just filter it away completely. But there is one guy who doesn't edit it out. A market official. A guy who used to be a local bureaucrat named Fei Changfeng.
Changfeng.
He happens to be sitting alone up in a tower overlooking the market. So he's got this bird's eye view, and he watches this old man shrink and jump into the gourd.
This is the crucial threshold moment for him.
Yeah, because he doesn't just ignore it.
Exactly. Fei Changfeng doesn't write it off as a hallucination or a trick of the light. He recognizes that he has just witnessed something transcendent. He is demonstrating the first prerequisite for enlightenment, which is an openness to the extraordinary.
So the very next day he goes down there. He respectfully approaches the disguised immortal. He brings offerings like wine and dried meat, and he bows. He shows ultimate respect.
Which is exactly what you should do in that situation.
And his reverence pays off. Iron Crutch Lee says, "Come back tomorrow." And when Fei returns, Lee invites him to follow him into the gourd.
I want you to really visualize this for a second.
It's hard to even picture.
Right. You are a human being anchored in physical reality, and an old man tells you to step into a piece of dried fruit hanging on a stick.
It makes no sense.
It requires a complete suspension of spatial logic.
It's mind-bending. But Fei does it. He actually follows him in. And the source material describes what he sees inside, and it is breathtaking.
It's not what you'd expect at all.
No, it is not a cramped, dark, seed-filled vegetable. Inside it is a sprawling, brightly lit jade hall. There are endless supplies of fine wine and delicious food covering these magnificent tables.
And that contrast is deliberate. The outside is rough and finite, but the inside is divine and infinite.
When I was trying to wrap my head around this, I couldn't help but think about geometry. It's like the TARDIS from Doctor Who, right? Or a video game pocket dimension.
That's a great analogy.
It's like if you imagine a two-dimensional character living on a flat piece of paper, trying to comprehend a three-dimensional sphere passing through their world.
Right, to the 2D character, it just looks like a circle growing and shrinking.
Exactly. Their brain cannot process the depth. Lai is essentially showing Fei that the three-dimensional space mortals live in is just as limited. The gourd is a pocket dimension that defies volume and mass.
That is an excellent way to frame it. By bringing Fei into the gourd, Lai is systematically dismantling Fei's understanding of physical laws.
He's breaking his reality.
Yeah, he is showing him that volume is not a fixed property of reality. Space can actually be folded.
And he keeps pushing the boundaries of that lesson, too. They sit down, they feast, they drink. Then it's time to go back to the real world. Like, finally reveals himself formally.
He lays his cards on the table.
Right. He says, "I'm an immortal. I'm here because of a mistake, but my time is up, and I have to leave. Do you want to come with me?" But before Fei can even answer, Lai says, "Let's have one last drink for the road. There's some wine downstairs."
This is a wonderfully subtle test.
It is.
Yeah.
So Lai asks Fei to go get the wine. Fei sends one of the servants from the Jade Hall down to lift this wine vessel, but the servant comes back and says they can't lift it.
It's just too heavy.
Yeah. So Fei sends 10 strong men down to lift this container of wine, and they cannot budge it. It is entirely immovable.
Bolted to the floor.
So Lai last goes downstairs himself and lifts this vessel with a single finger. Just hooks one finger under it and carries it up.
Oh.
And when they look at it, it's tiny.
Yeah, it's incredibly small.
The text says it looks like it only holds about 1 sheng,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very small, traditional Chinese measure. Maybe like a pint.
Right. The weight of it was immense to the mortals, yet totally weightless to the immortal.
And then they start drinking from this tiny 1-pint cup, and they drink from it all day long. 2 grown men drinking continuously, and the cup never empties. It is literally a bottomless pint.
We really need to analyze the why here. Why the unliftable cup?
Yeah.
Why the bottomless wine?
Yeah, what is the actual mechanism there?
Well, in Taoist thought, properties like mass, weight, and volume are not inherent to the object itself. They are relative.
Relative to what exactly?
They depend entirely on the observer's relationship with the Tao, the fundamental nature of the universe. To the 10 servants whose minds are heavy with mortal limitations, the cup acts heavy. But to Li, who flows with the Tao, the cup is light.
Oh, wow. So the physical properties of the object actually change based on the spiritual state of the person interacting with it.
Yes, exactly. Lai is demonstrating that the rules of reality Fei has lived his entire life by are completely arbitrary. They are just a projection.
That is wild.
To step onto the path of enlightenment, one must first deeply truly realize that the physical world is malleable. You have to accept that the solid lines of the world aren't actually solid.
And Fei passes this first phase. His mind is sufficiently unmoored from physics. He accepts the impossible, and he wants to learn the Tao. He wants to go with Lai.
But there's a catch.
There's always a catch. His heart is still tethered to his living room. Once they are back out of the gorge standing in the normal market, Fei hesitates. He tells Lei he wants to go, but he's terrified of leaving his family behind.
Right, his parents, his wife.
Yeah, he knows they rely on him, and he knows it will completely devastate them to just vanish.
It is a profoundly human hesitation. And this is where Lai realizes that dismantling a mortal's physical reality is actually the easy part.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's
Oh.
dismantling their emotional attachments that requires drastic, almost cruel measures.
And Lee's solution to this is wild. I mean, it's extreme. He takes a piece of green bamboo, cuts it to roughly the height of Fei Changfeng, performs some sort of magic on it, and suddenly, to anyone looking at it, this bamboo pole looks exactly like Fei Changfeng's dead body.
A perfect lifeless replica.
Yes, and Li hangs this bamboo replica behind Fei's house, so it looks like Fei has hanged himself.
A staged suicide.
It's so dark. And then Li forces Fei to stand there unperceived, invisible, basically, and watch what happens.
He has to witness the whole fallout.
Yeah, Fei watches his own family find the body. He watches his whole family, young and old, break down in terrified wailing. They weep over the body, they mourn him, and they organize a full funeral and bury him.
Right there in front of him.
Fei is standing right next to them, watching his wife and parents sob over a piece of bamboo. I have to say, reading this, I felt incredibly conflicted.
How so?
It just feels like psychological torture. Why is this level of absolute devastation required?
It is jarring. It really is. I mean, we place immense value on family and emotional connection, but we have to look at this through the lens of ancient mystical asceticism.
Okay.
In these frameworks, mortal attachments aren't just sweet emotional bonds, they are literal anchors. They generate a sort of karmic gravity.
Karmic gravity, meaning they physically hold the soul down?
In a sense, yes. If Fei just said goodbye and walked into the mountains, his mind would never actually leave the market.
He'd always be wondering about them.
Exactly. He would be meditating, but he'd be wondering if his wife had enough money for the winter or if his father's cough was getting better. His physical body would be in the wilderness, but his spiritual energy, his intention would be fractured and tied to his mortal life.
So the ritual in the funeral serves a very specific mechanical purpose then.
Exactly. By forcing Fei to watch his own funeral, Lai is inducing an ego death.
Wow, an ego death.
Fei witnesses the severing of the social contract. He sees that the world moves on without him. His family mourns, they bury the body, and the man known as Fei Changfeng, the market official, is legally and socially dead.
That frees him up.
Right. This frees his internal energy to cultivate immortality. The cruelty is viewed as a necessary surgery to cut out the tumor of earthly attachment.
So the ties are completely cut. Fei follows Li deep into the unmapped wild mountains. And this is where the rigorous psychological testing really begins.
And it escalates quickly.
It really does. The text outlines 3 specific trials that escalate in a fascinating way. They aren't just arbitrary tests of toughness. They target the foundational pillars of the human psyche.
They systematically test his biological, his intellectual, and his cultural imperatives.
Let's start with the biological imperative, the fear of the wild. Li leads Fei into a forest and simply abandons him in the middle of a pack of tigers.
He just leaves him there.
Just walks away. Fei is surrounded by snarling apex predators. And Fei does absolutely nothing. He stands his ground perfectly calm, he doesn't flinch, the tigers don't touch him, and Li returns.
This targets the deepest evolutionary panic we possess, right? The fear of being consumed.
Yeah, no one wants to be eaten by a tiger.
Millions of years of biology scream at us to run from a tiger. So by staying calm, Fei overrides his biological programming. He is beginning to recognize that his physical body is just a temporary vessel, so the fear of its violent destruction is irrelevant to his true self.
He completely beats his own biology. So Lee moves to the intellectual imperative, the fear of physics and chance.
Right, the boulder.
Yes. Lee puts Faye in a completely empty room and tells him to lie down on the floor. Then Lee suspends a 10,000-pound stone boulder directly over Faye's head, and it's suspended by a rotting, decaying piece of rope.
It is the ultimate Sword of Damocles scenario.
But worse, because Lee summons a swarm of rats.
Oh, right, the rats.
The rats climb up the wall, they crawl onto the rope, and they start chewing on it. The psychological torture of the anticipation here is staggering. The rope is snapping thread by thread. The rock is groaning.
Just waiting for the drop.
Physics dictates that at any second, this boulder is going to drop and crush him into a paste. And Faye just lies there, looking up at his impending doom, not moving a single muscle.
And this is the moment Lee actually praises him. Lee returns and says, "You can be taught."
It feels like an escalation from the tigers. But why exactly? I mean, a tiger can actively hunt you. A rock is just a rock.
Because a tiger is a living creature. A mortal mind can rationalize that an immortal master has tamed the tigers or cast a calming spell on them.
Oh, like it's a magic trick.
Exactly. But the boulder and the rope, that represents unfeeling absolute physics. Gravity does not care if you are meditating, and the rats chewing the rope represent chaotic, unpredictable chance.
Ah, so it's really about cause and effect.
Yes. Faye has to overcome the intellectual illusion that cause and effect, as mortals understand it, has power over him. He has to trust that reality is fluid enough that even a falling 10,000-pound rock cannot harm his fundamental essence.
He has to let go of the outcome.
He must reach a state of total detachment from the physical outcome.
And he does. He accepts the illusion of gravity and chance. So Lai is thrilled, and he says Faye is ready for the final step.
The hardest one.
But this last trial is the one that trips up almost everyone who reads this text, because it feels so jarringly out of place compared to facing down tigers and boulders.
It's very different.
Lai brings Faye out to a field, points to a pile of human feces on the ground, and orders Faye to eat it.
It is the ultimate test of the cultural imperative.
The text is incredibly graphic about this, too. It specifically points out that there are 3 foul-smelling bugs crawling around in the excrement.
Yeah, they really paint a picture.
The stench is overwhelming. It is the most viscerally disgusting thing imaginable. And Lai just says, eat.
Just one word.
Faye looks at it, smells. It feels the revulsion rise up, and he refuses. The text notes that his mind was disgusted by it. He shakes his head no.
And that's it.
Yeah, and Lee lets out this heavy sigh, looks at him and says, "You almost attained the Tao. You were right there, and I am so full of regret that you failed right at this step."
It is a devastating, tragic failure right at the finish line.
I really need to dig into the mechanics of this with you. Why is this the breaking point? We just saw a man calmly watch rats chew the rope of a massive boulder suspended over his face.
Right, he wasn't scared of death.
He was completely unafraid of a violent, gruesome death. Why does he fail at eating bugs and dirt?
To understand this, we have to look deeply at the Taoist concept of qi and the human mechanism of disgust. Disgust is largely a survival mechanism, right? But it quickly evolves into a cultural binary.
Meaning we split things into good and bad.
Exactly. We categorize the entire world into things that are clean, pure, and elevated versus things that are dirty, diseased, and low.
Right. It's how we navigate the world without getting sick and how we establish social hierarchy.
Exactly. But in Taoist cosmology, everything in the universe, from a star to a human body to a piece of gold to a pile of excrement, is made of the exact same fundamental substance.
Key?
Yes, qi or vital energy. It is an ocean of energy. A banquet in a jade hall and a pile of dirt with bugs in it are just different waves on the exact same ocean. The water is identical.
So the difference between the two only exists in the human mind.
Precisely. They are both temporary configurations of qi. When Faye was in the gourd, he happily drank the magical wine and ate the delicacies. He readily accepted the pure illusion.
But the impure one was too much.
When faced with the impure illusion, his mortal ego flared back up in defense. He categorized one configuration of atoms as acceptable and the other as repulsive.
By refusing to eat it, he was basically declaring this object has inherent objective qualities that I reject.
Yes. And by doing so, he proved that he still believed the objects were independently real. He couldn't let go of his human categorization.
That is so deep.
If he truly understood the Tao, he would have eaten the feces as easily as he drank the wine in the gourd, knowing neither truly exists in the way his mind perceives them. His disgust proved that his ego was still firmly anchored to the mortal framework of reality.
He wasn't afraid to die, But he was afraid to lower his status to that of the filth. His ego survived the fear of death, but not the fear of degradation.
The ego is the final, most stubborn lock in the escape room, and Faye couldn't pick it.
So he fails to become a full immortal. But Lai doesn't send him away completely empty-handed. Because Faye made it so far, Lai gives him what amounts to a magical severance package.
A consolation prize, basically.
He gives Faye a bamboo staff and tells him he can ride it anywhere in an instant, and then instructs him to throw it into Gill Lake when he gets home.
Okay.
He also gives Faye a magical talisman, just a slip of paper or wood with divine symbols on it, that grants him the authority to command the ghosts and earth gods of the mortal realm.
So he is given supernatural transportation and bureaucratic authority.
Not a bad deal. Faye hops on the bamboo staff, and the space between the mountains and his home folds instantly. He lands back in his hometown.
Fast travel.
Right? He thinks to himself that it was a wild 10 days in the mountains. But when he walks into town, everything is wrong. People look older. He goes to his house, and his family is terrified of him.
Because to them, he's been dead.
Yeah, he thinks he's been gone for a week and a half, but he quickly discovers it has been over 10 years.
This is a classic Taoist trope regarding time dilation. A day in the caves of the immortals is 1,000 years in the mortal realm.
It's like Interstellar.
Yeah, time is not a universal constant. It warps in the presence of intense divine Qi.
It feels very Einsteinian, centuries before relativity even existed.
Yeah.
And his family, understandably, thinks he is a demon possessing the form of their dead relative. I mean, they saw his dead body. They buried him 10 years ago.
So he has to prove it to them somehow.
He tells them to go into the graveyard, dig up his grave, and open the coffin.
A grim but necessary way to break the illusion.
They pry open the coffin, and there is no skeleton. Just the rotted remains of the bamboo pole iron crutch Lai had left there years ago. The family finally believes him.
That must have been quite a shock.
And speaking of bamboo, Faye remembers Lai's instruction. He takes the staff he rode home on and throws it into Gay Lake. The text says that the moment the bamboo hits the water, it instantly transforms into a dragon.
Which touches on the Taoist concept of hua, or transformation.
What's that?
It's similar to Zhuangzi's famous dream, where he didn't know if he was a man dreaming he was a butterfly or a butterfly dreaming he was a man. The boundaries between flora, fauna, and object are completely permeable.
Because it's all just chi.
Because everything is made of the same underlying Qi, a stick can easily become a dragon, just as a man's body could be replaced by a stick.
So Faye is back, and while he isn't an immortal, he is a tremendously powerful magician. The text gives us these incredibly quirky details about his life. He essentially becomes the supernatural sheriff of his region.
A local hero.
He cures diseases, he whips ghosts, and he commands the local earth gods.
And it's important to understand who these earth gods or Tudigong actually are. They aren't omnipotent deities.
Right, they're like middle management.
In the celestial bureaucracy, they are the lowest rung on the ladder. They are essentially the spiritual mayors or precinct captains of local neighborhoods. They manage the minor spirits and record the deeds of mortals.
And Faye is just bossing them around. The text says that sometimes Faye would be sitting entirely alone in a room, and suddenly his face would flush with anger and he'd start yelling at the empty air.
Looking completely crazy.
Yeah, people would ask him what he was doing, and he'd say he was scolding invisible ghosts who broke the law. He's policing the invisible realm from his living room.
It's so funny to picture.
And my absolute favorite detail, if he had guests over for dinner and they were short on appetizers, he would send a spiritual messenger to the Song Market, which is thousands of miles away, to grab some specific fish paste, and the messenger would return instantly.
It really highlights a certain absurdity to his existence. He possesses profound space-bending power, and he's using it to fetch condiments.
He's living like a comic book superhero in ancient China. But there's a massive historical tie-in here that elevates Fei Changfeng from a quirky folklore character to a foundational cultural figure.
This part is fascinating.
Fei takes on a student named Huan Jing. And one day, Fei makes a dire prediction. He tells Huan Jing that on the 9th day of the 9th month, a massive disaster is going to strike his family.
And this date is not arbitrary at all. We have to look at the numerology of the I Ching, or the Book of Changes.
How does that play into it?
In this system, odd numbers are yang, representing heat, light, and masculine energy, and even numbers are yin, representing cold, dark, and feminine energy. The number 9 is the highest single-digit yang number.
So the 9th day of the 9th month is a double dose of of 9.
Exactly. It represents a massive overload of yang energy. In traditional Chinese medicine and philosophy, balance is everything. Too much of anything, even positive yang energy, creates a dangerous metaphysical imbalance that manifests as disaster, disease, or death.
So Fei gives Huanjing a very specific prescription to survive this yang overload. He tells the family to sew small red bags, fill them with dogwood, specifically zuyu. Tie them to their arms, leave their house, climb up a high mountain, and drink chrysanthemum wine.
Very specific instructions.
The family follows the instructions exactly. They climb the mountain and stay out all day. When they return home at night, absolute carnage. All of their cows, sheep, chickens, and dogs have died violently.
The disaster struck just as predicted. But because the family was on the mountain performing these specific rituals, the disaster bypassed them and took the livestock as a proxy sacrifice.
And the rituals themselves mean something right.
The rituals themselves are deeply symbolic. Dogwood has a very strong pungent scent, which is believed to repel evil qi. Chrysanthemums are incredibly resilient flowers that bloom in the cold autumn, which is a yin season. So drinking chrysanthemum wine introduces yin energy to balance out the overwhelming yang of the double night.
And what blows my mind is that this isn't just a story. This exact narrative is the mythological origin of the real-world Double Ninth Festival, or the Chanyang Festival.
It's still celebrated today.
For centuries in China, on the 9th day of the 9th lunar month, people actually climb mountains, drink chrysanthemum wine, and historically wore dogwood to ward off disease and respect their elders. This text is an origin myth blending wild fantasy with enduring cultural practices.
It shows how Fei Chongfeng bridges the gap between the inaccessible abstract realm of the immortals and the practical ritualistic life of everyday people trying to avoid disaster.
He is the bridge,
Yeah.
but the bridge eventually collapses. We have to talk about the tragic end of Fei Chongfeng, because he is powerful. Yes, but we have to ask why he is powerful.
Right, his power is not internal. It is derived entirely from the talisman Li gave him.
Exactly. He relied on a physical object rather than achieving true internal immortality. It is borrowed power. And one day, he loses the talisman.
Just misplaces it.
The anchor to his authority is completely severed. And the second he loses it, all those ghosts he had been whipping and yelling at in his living room realize he's unarmed. They swarm him and they murder him.
It is a brutal, ironic comeuppance.
The best modern analog I could think of is a low-level IT guy at a massive corporation who finds a sticky note on the floor with the master password to the entire company server.
Oh, that's a good one.
Suddenly he's a god. He's deleting files, he's reading the CEO's emails, he's ruling the network like a tyrant. But he doesn't actually understand how the code works. He has no internal knowledge of the architecture.
Right, he's just using a cheat code.
The second he drops that sticky note in a puddle, the firewall recognizes he's an intruder. The system locks him out and he's instantly destroyed by the very system he thought he controlled.
That perfectly captures the mechanism of his downfall. In Taoist terms, he failed to cultivate his own golden elixir or internal alchemy.
You skipped a step.
He had the passwords to the universe, but he didn't have the internal spiritual architecture to sustain the power. He was an interloper relying on an external crutch. And external crutches can always be kicked away.
Because he couldn't eat the bugs. He couldn't pass that final test of internal transformation. It is so bleak.
It really is.
But while Fei's story ends tragically, Iron Crutch Lai's mission continues. Remember, Lai is still trying to get his cosmic badge back. He eventually does enough good deeds, completes his earthly community service, and is reinstated as a high immortal.
He gets his job back.
He joins the famous 8 Immortals. But he still likes to come down to Earth to test people, which leads to an entirely different kind of failure.
Because Lai adopts a new disguise. He is no longer the mystical pharmacist offering miracles.
No, he goes for the absolute bottom of the social barrel. He disguises himself as a beggar, but a very specific kind of beggar one, with severely infected, rotting, ulcerated legs.
A truly pitiful sight.
He intentionally makes himself into someone that society instinctively recoils from. And he crashes a grand merit ceremony at a wealthy family's house in the South.
Just walks right in.
This is a big religious gathering with lots of rich people trying to buy good karma. And Li is there disguised as the rotten beggar, warming himself by the kitchen stove.
He is again playing with the concept of disgust and social categorization, testing who can see past the physical decay to the divine essence underneath.
But his cover is blown by a magical tip-off. Down the street at the local watchtower, there's a timekeeping plaque, essentially a water clock, adorned with 2 carved wooden boys.
Okay.
During the night, a poor night watchman hears voices. He looks up, and these two wooden boys have come alive. They are gossiping with each other.
Just chatting away.
One says, hey, that beggar with the rotten legs at the marriage ceremony is actually the great immortal Iron Crutch Lie.
Mm-hmm.
The watchman overhears this, and the next day he runs over to the wealthy family's house.
The inanimate becoming animate is a classic trope of divine chi disrupting local reality.
So the watchman finds the beggar by the stove, drops to his knees, and begs for salvation. Now Lee looks at him and asks, how do you know who I am?
Calling him out.
And the watchman tells the truth about the talking wooden boys. So Lee decides to test him right then and there. Lee simply stands up and walks directly into the blazing fire of the kitchen stove.
Just steps right in.
He stands in the inferno, completely unhurt, and says to the watchman, just follow me in here and I will save you.
It's an invitation to overcome the fear of physics, much like Faye's boulder test.
But the watchman feels the heat of the fire, and he is terrified. He refuses to step into the stove. He fails the immediate test, but Lee gives him a second chance, accompanied by a very dark command.
A very strange command.
The watchman follows Lee out onto the road and begs for another chance. Lee says, fine, go back to the watchtower, take some nails, and nail those two wooden boys to the plaque. Pin them down, then meet me at the bridge. A boat will come for you. Jump onto the boat without fear, and I will save you.
This is a really complex psychological maneuver.
And a painful one. The watchman goes back and nails the wooden boys to the tower. The text notes that all night long the wooden boys cried in agony.
Screaming.
They screamed in pain and cursed the watchman for doing this to them. When I read this, it felt incredibly vindictive. Is Lee just punishing the wooden boys for blowing his cover?
It looks petty, but it's actually deeply profound. We have to look at the mechanism of the watchman's faith.
What do you mean?
How did he find out Lee was an immortal? By eavesdropping on magical statues. He relied entirely on an external source. He didn't have the internal spiritual perception to recognize the divine within the rotting beggar. He just found a shortcut.
I see.
The wooden boys represented the watchman's reliance on external phenomena to guide his spiritual path.
Oh, wow. So taking them out of the equation.
By commanding the watchman to silence the boys, to literally nail them down, Lee is forcing the watchman to sever his dependency on magical shortcuts.
That makes so much sense.
He is saying, you cannot rely on talking statues to give you faith. You have to generate that faith internally. The pain of the boys they're crying and cursing reflects the psychological pain of severing earthly dependencies. It hurts to stop relying on the things that give us easy answers.
He's taking away the training wheels and forcing him to fly blind. So we arrive at the final test at the bridge. The watchman waits from early morning until noon.
Just waiting for this boat.
He is looking for a ship, something substantial to carry him to salvation. But no ship arrives. Finally, a single tiny dead leaf floats down the river and stops at the bridge.
The single leaf.
The watchman knows this must be the boat. But he looks at this flimsy little leaf, he looks at his own body weight, and physics takes over his brain again. He believes it cannot hold his weight, and he refuses to step onto the leaf.
He fails for the exact same reason he failed the fire test. He trusts his mortal eyes more than he trusts the immortal.
Liab appears next to him, sighs, and says, your mortal attachments and your fears are just too heavy. You cannot be saved.
It's over for him.
And to prove it, Lee steps lightly off the bridge and lands right on that tiny leaf. The moment his foot touches it, the leaf transforms into a boat. It catches the wind, rides the waves, and ascends straight up into the clouds.
That imagery is amazing.
As he rises the other men, 8 immortals appear in the sky to guide him away, leaving the watchman standing alone on the bridge.
Your fears are too heavy. The physical weight of the watchman wasn't the issue. Gravity wasn't going to sink the leaf. The psychological weight of his doubt was what would sink it.
If we synthesize both of these failures, Fei Changfeng and the watchman, they are brilliant foils for each other. Say Changfeng passed the physical fear tests. He beat the tigers and the boulder, but he failed because he couldn't overcome his cultural disgust. He couldn't conquer the ego of purity.
And the watchman is the exact inverse. The watchman failed because he couldn't overcome the illusion of physics. He was paralyzed by the assumption that combustion and gravity were absolute laws.
Right.
One was trapped by social conditioning and the other was trapped by physical conditioning.
Both men hit a wall where they said, this far and no further. My reality ends here. And because they couldn't break that final wall, they remained grounded. They could see the divine, but they couldn't enter it.
They locked themselves out.